Welcome to Action Hour. Today we're exposing a troubling twist in the fight for animal welfare. The UK government is reportedly in talks with travel industry lobbyists looking to weaken or even scrap a law that bans promoting cruel attractions like elephant rides and tiger selfies. Despite passing in 2023, this law isn't being properly enforced, and unethical businesses are still thriving. We're asking, is the UK backing down on its promise? Stay with us as we speak with Duncan McNair, founder of Stay, who helped push this law into action. Welcome, Duncan, and so glad to have you here today. I know my audience is very, very curious to learn what happened last time you were here. The law was signed by King Charles, and you were cautiously optimistic that it would go through, but you said you needed support. And then you had a meeting set up for, I believe, October 13th.
Correct.
What happened?
Okay, well, first of all, good morning, and thanks so much for having me, and hello to all your viewers and listeners. Yes, you've summarized it very well, Lindsay. So this is a very, very important animal welfare law. We'll, I think, go on later to describe exactly what it aims to do. But there is a real problem. Our government here in Westminster in London is simply failing to implement the law. It's a law that raced through our parliament with virtually no opposition. This is almost unheard of. There were no divisions or amendments, and it finally got through the House of Commons and the House of Lords. It went that the King Charles, immediately signed it off with his royal assent, and then it became law on the 18th of September 2023, almost exactly 18 months ago. And yet nothing has happened, nothing by way of implementation of this critical law, which aims to save many vertebrate species from extinction and many, many people from horrible injuries and death who are attacked by tortured tourist animals, whether they're elephants, tigers, many, many other species. The problem is this. We did have, I lead Save the Asian Elephants, which is a charity here in London and indeed across the world, and also now a coalition of animal protection organizations. We're called the Low Welfare Act Coalition. And it's a huge number, about 150 charities here and abroad. And we have been pressing for the proper implementation, both the previous government that was kicked out in the middle of 2024, and since then, the present Labour government that's been in since. Not one of them has lifted a finger, as far as we can see, to implement this law. Now, this is a law. It is the constitutional obligation of government to abide by, implement, and enforce the law of the land. They have no business backtracking all the time. And we did have a meeting in October. We made very clear what we considered to be the imperative of getting on with implementing this law before both more animals and more people are killed. And we started then to get a very different tone from that which had been given by the Labour Party during the general election. During the election, they said this is the most fantastic animal law. It's the most important. It must be implemented. It's an imperative. Now they're saying, oh, it's very difficult. We've got to deal with the complications. We've got to deal with the travel industry.
What are some of the complications that they stated?
They're the people who should be here to answer that. But what in fact we think they mean, well, first of all, they said, send us lots of evidence of the abuses. We've sent them a huge amount of evidence. Secondly, Duncan McNair, send us the very activities that you say should be banned under the law. Now, that seems a fair question, because under the law, there've got to be certain papers put before government that list the actual activities, activity regulations. We've sent them an enormous list. We sent it over a year ago, and we sent it again early this year. And it's a tragic, heartbreaking list of activities which even today in the 21st century every day are being advertised for sale across the UK and indeed much of the world. So I can go through some of them.
Let's just, without naming names of particular companies, let's just tell people. I think for me, the easiest way to explain is that last week when I made a reservation to book a hotel, I was involved with one of the companies. So that's how ubiquitous it is, not only in America, but all over the world. So let's go into that. And then I want to show for people that don't really know what's going on with the cruelty. We want to go into that next. So, but please go on about who's involved.
Well, it's difficult. I don't know if you're asking me to name company names. That's tricky.
No.
They're a lot bigger than us.
You can allude to it.
If the question was how widespread is it, in the UK alone, we've identified 1,200 companies who are advertising brutal elephant venues alone. If you ask, well, what about all the other species being advertised at different venues? That runs then, by different companies. That runs into many, many thousands of companies who are involved and I can name companies, but it's up to you whether you let me do so. We have huge lists of them. And in the case
Can we refer people to your website possibly to see for themselves, and just say that I would say that in your travel, your online travel, it's involved in almost every single venue. Now, maybe you can correct me on that, but I would say that if I personally go online to get some Airbnb, whatever I'm going for, hotel room, if I'm booking travel overseas to certain countries, and we can name those countries, I'm almost guaranteed to see that I can get selfies with tigers and I can do all this stuff. And I do want you to get into that. I want you to get into what are the red flags to look for. So, but just expound on what I just said, if you would, more.
Okay, right. So let's talk firstly. We've got to be species specific, because there are different dangers for different species. But let's take elephants, for example. And this might apply more widely. This does apply more widely. No activity involving an animal that is touched, ridden, stroked, that you have that plays games for you, that stands on its head. All of that is unethical because it has been enforced by brutality. Elephants don't naturally stand on their heads to amuse humans, nor do they admit people on their back for rides, nor do they admit people right beside them to stroke them and take selfies. All of that has been brutally enforced by stabbing and beating and torture from a very early age. There is an abundance of evidence on and offline for anyone who cares to spend 2 or 3 minutes looking for it.
They don't have to, because I have a clip from your movie, Road to Nong Nooch, and we're going to play that right now.
Okay. In Thailand, there exists a tourist show so cruel that it has no place in the modern world. Tragically, it epitomizes the horrors for both humans and captive Asian elephants everywhere in modern tourism. Every year, thousands of people visit Nong Nooch Village Park for elephant displays, to watch these magnificent animals perform acts completely incongruous with their wild nature. To ensure they work effectively, teams of handlers torture and beat both babies and adults daily, ensuring the elephants are kept in a traumatized state of submission. But the shows can be no less devastating for the tourists who watch them, as Helen Costigan discovered tragically after traveling to Nong Nooch with her father and sister.
So the elephants were coming down the corral. The one that attacked us had a mahout on his back, and then jumped forward. The mahout stood on his tusks, and just as they've come to the end, only a couple of feet from us, the mahout then jumps back onto the elephant's head it became very aggressive. Its head came down. We were sat roughly the same height as this.
Yeah. And the elephant is, as it were, there.
Yeah, and then its head came down and it was a straight attack. So its tusk went into me.
Yeah.
Its right tusk, the trunk threw Andrea back onto the concrete.
Yeah.
It then pulled its head back in and then repeatedly attacked. I'd had the tusk had come back out of me. I had thrown myself off to one side and was dragged away by some other tourists. The elephant then went in and gored Andrea in her sides.
Yeah. How long did the attack take?
A matter of seconds. It was probably over within 20 seconds. My father, he pushed on the elephant's trunk.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it backed away.
Did the mahouts not come to your help?
I think it was just because it was so quick. It was over in a matter of seconds that you can't control a 6-ton elephant.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good a mahout you have or how many years you've spent training that elephant. You cannot control a wild animal.
Yeah.
For the court case with my power of attorney, and was awarded very minimal damages. The park claimed to be not earning much money, and that the money was being used to feed the elephants, and you know that they wasn't making much profit. However, it was part of a wider group that had Lamborghinis and Ferraris outside their front door.
Yeah.
Wow. So if you could go into a little bit more detail about that for people in terms of, you know, how many, we talked, it's got to do with elephant rides and things like that, and so many other ways of using elephants. Maybe what we should show now, and I want to talk about the other animals, and that was the point I was about to get to, but I'm going to show people just a few seconds, not even a minute of video of them breaking an elephant. And this is very, very, very disturbing. So, you know, I just want people to have fair warning. Okay, here we go. Oh my gosh. Well, I guess that got off even a little before I was going to, but explain what was going on there without getting too graphic, if you would.
Okay, so that was a wild elephant taken into captivity and being dragged with ropes around its neck and so on, dragged into what's called the crushing cage. There it's kept for weeks and months in a terrified state. It's beat and then it isolated, which is terrible. So only a young elephant. Then it's they start to stab and rip and beat it and keep it awake with massive noise, and eventually break its spirits so that it is totally and utterly terrified and will do anything, submit to any indignity and any horror in tourism. That's it. And it's called Pajan, the breaking of the spirits. This is not a one-off. It happens every day, thousands of times, probably hundreds of thousands of times across Southeast Asia and elsewhere, including the USA. We saw a couple of images there from the States of that little baby elephant stretched out on the ground where it's being abused to break it for, there we are, to break it for easy use in tourism. I think in that case, in a circus. So that's the invariable fate of any Asian elephant taken into captivity for any form of commercial exploitation, whether it be tourism, circuses, festivals, and so on.
Right. I want to show another clip here because we want to see that it's not just elephants, it's other animals. No. And I got this from another source. Welcome to Action Hour. Today we're sorry, that's the wrong clip. Oh gosh. All right, that clip's not available, but what I do want to do now is go to your website. I'm going to share that, and you'll walk through and talk a little bit about the other species that are involved while we go there. Okay, so here we are on your website. I want to make that full screen. There we go. And walk us through here, if you will. I'll let you navigate us through. I'm having a little difficulty here. Wait, let me see. Oh, there we go. I think it's that little thing there. Now, I'm assuming you guys can see landmark new animal protection law here. So
Yep.
go ahead and walk us through. I'll try to be able to see what you see.
Okay, so I'll explain what the law is. And the law is an enactment to ban the advertising in the UK of any overseas activity that brutalizes any vertebrate species anywhere in the world. And the standard of brutality is that which already set by the UK law, which would be unlawful if it were happening in our country, in the UK. So there's already a standard. And it's brutality means real torture. It's awful. Much of this brutality threatens the survival of many of the world's most iconic species, not just elephants, but apes, big cats, bears, dolphins, ostriches, and exotic birds, as well as vulnerable horses, donkeys, camels, and many others, lots of kinds of birds and so on. And so this brutal exploitation takes place across the world for tourism, fun, and profits. That's what that's what the law is about. That's why it's needed, and it will help animals by prohibiting travel companies from selling or advertising attractions that inflict these low standards on any vertebrate animals across the world.
Right. And I think I do have a clip here. Let me just try and get to this next one. If our audience will bear with me a moment. I'm going to stop that screen and see if I can bring up another one. Just keep going for a moment here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And while I bring this up, if you would.
So let me just tell you some of that stuff in a bit more detail. So, Asian elephants are complex, majestic, ecologically crucial mega gardeners of the forests, which they nourish and sustain and help to contain our carbon output. Their sad fate in tourism is to be snatched from the wild, their mothers killed in front of them, isolated and starved and beaten up. And one half of them die in the process. The rest of their lives are lived in extreme violence, deprivation, and despair. But here's the thing, Lindsay.
Hang on one second, Duncan, because I do have the video ready. Let's just play this with the cubs, and then you can go back into your next point. I'm sorry, but let's stay on.
Okay.
You've probably seen pictures of people posing with tigers and other animals in your social media feeds. But this look inside Dade City's Wild Things shows the hidden cruelty of using wild animals as props in photos. Just hours after being born, baby tigers were taken from their mothers. These terrified newborn cubs were carelessly pulled through the metal wires of this cage. It is unlikely that they will ever see their mother again. Just outside the cage, a dead newborn cub was left on the ground. The surviving cubs were then used in money-making photo ops for tourists, including swimming with tigers. Tigers were forced to swim in this pool with patrons, and if they tried to get out, they were sometimes pulled back in by their tails. This tiger, named Ariel, had an apparent neurological condition. This white tiger cub named
I'm not sure why I think gotcha. Okay, sorry about that. That was just I mean, we can see the scope of it. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I really just, before we went on, because I want you to talk about the law, but before we go on, just the scope of this, and I do want to mention that you've been through this on your own basically for a long time. You've won a really significant award for your work as well. And I want to just stop for a moment here and mention that, and also ask people if they have to leave to be sure and get the address here. Let me just make sure this is up so that people get this information. And I do want to bring up the award that you won and just the significance of how important your work is, Duncan. So go ahead and speak about this for a moment, if you would.
The award? Well, I'm a practicing lawyer in the City of London. I'm what you call a trial lawyer, and I have been running alongside that animal welfare work pro bono for 20 years or more. I founded Save the Asian Elephants 10 years ago, and I've been pushing hard with an ever-growing team with the biggest petition in world history for any animal species. And we got this major new law, and I was very honoured just a few months ago to be named as the Law Society of England and Wales Legal Hero of the Year out of 220,000 lawyers. So it's a great honour, but above all, it's a great showcase for the cause that I and Save the Asian Elephants espouse, especially now under the aegis of the Low Welfare Act Coalition, which protects or argues for all the endangered species of the world that can be helped by this new legislation, which is why it's so important that it gets in. But any kind of publicity to raise awareness is good. The Law Society is the most famous legal body in the world, really. It's 200 years old this year, and it's the first time in its 200-year history that it's ever recognized an animal-related cause.
Wow.
So we're very proud of that.
You should be. And you have some significant celebrities and political figures that back you. And as well as, I mean, the list, let's just look at the list of this. This is an old one, but these are some of the most significant animal rights organizations in the world. Greenpeace, PETA. I mean, look at all these different organizations we're so familiar with, Animal Aid, and the list goes on and on and on. So it's just devastating in a sense that with all of this.
Well, I mean, our momentum is growing. Actually, we did a letter. I organized a letter last month, which is signed. A lot of these letters by NGOs are signed by 6 or 8 or 10 signatories. This was signed by 115 signatories, and since it was sent, another 20 have asked to sign it. And they are, as you say, some of the biggest and most influential, not just NGOs, but politicians, academics, legal figures, medical people, conservationists, religious leaders, you name it, everyone and anyone. It will be a very serious constitutionally dereliction by our government of its duty, and I am meeting them again tomorrow, by the way.
Wow.
If they fail to implement this law. I'm yearning really to tell you about some of the other poor species that are covered by this. So many, and some of, well, for example, ostrich riding. I don't know how many people have heard of that, but I've now seen video of quite a young ostrich lying in the dust, choking to death, choking on its blood, as its back has been broken by being ridden heavily by tourists with a leather throttle around its neck, all for tourism fun. And dolphins, prisoners in tiny pools with no means of retreating, full of chlorine. They live their lives in these tiny pools when they're used to the open seas, being ridden pretty much to death, dragged out of the water all the time. Lions, walking with lions who are later sold on for canned hunting, meaning they're just shot to death in a cage, cowering and terrified. And let me tell you one thing. In China, for example, and these places are advertised, slaughter festivals where lots of different species are led into the ring, and the audience can shout out as to how they wish these animals to be put to death, and so on and so forth. All of these activities, and right through to bullfighting and others, are all potentially and should be included in this act if government will let us. No wonder it's described as the most important animal protection law ever in the history of the British Isles, and government is now under the sway of the grossly unethical end of the travel industry, which is making big money from the ruination of these species, and in the process killing huge numbers of people. We know in the case of elephants alone, 1,000 people have suffered catastrophic injuries from captive elephants going nuts, and 800 more killed. the most horrific injuries, crushed heads, crushed chest cavities, and ripped apart, just like poor Helen Costigan's sister, and so on. On it goes. There were 3 or 4 more last month. So it's time to put a stop to it and to turn the market towards ethical tourism. Animal tourism, fine, but they must be treated in an ethical way in natural surroundings where they're protected, and so are people.
I want to mention that if people go to your website, you have a whole section on that. So just go to stay.org and
Right.
it will be, you can go there and find out where the ethical ones are. And there are many, many places you can go, sanctuaries. But some of the things to look out for, let's just cover that real quick. And then I want to talk about what people can do to help. But when you're going to book a trip, what to look out for? Okay,
well, the key thing, it's a really important question, and thanks for raising it. The key thing is that you should not be allowed to be having direct physical interaction with an animal, touching it, stroking it, riding on it, playing with it, right beside it as it plays games, football and darts and all that. All of those signify that the animal has been brutalized into submitting to these unnatural activities. Animals should be seen at a safe and respectful distance. They should have plenty of space to move around in. They're not in tiny cages. They should be free to express their natural behaviors in group activities. They should be amongst their own, not isolated and single. These are some of the key factors. The reason we don't list a long list, and there is a long list, we do hold them, of the most brutal of venues is because we'll get sued by these very ruthless companies, and it's difficult for us. But more to the point, what's good today may be bad tomorrow, and we know that. And we've dealt with these people at close quarters. Many of them are really unethical. And by the way, you mentioned sanctuary. These words sanctuary and haven and orphanage, these are very elastic terms. Of themselves, they mean nothing. And so don't be seduced by the word sanctuary. Be very careful. And frankly, the other thing you can do is you look for injuries on animals. You will see them all over the place. I know so well now a healthy from a brutalized elephant, for example. And it's many other species as well. If they're listless and lying down all the time, chances are they're not having a proper existence.
Exactly. Now we want to get to the key question here. When you have so much momentum behind you, how do we break through this corporate greed situation that we're seeing here? How do we break through that?
Well, it's the obligation of government to implement the law. They have no choice. They must do it. And ultimately, they can be brought to account in the courts. Separation of powers is everything, as I know as a lawyer. So ultimately, what we call judicial review would be implemented against government. It's not easy, but it would have to be done. We hope it won't be done. What the government must do is shake off any stranglehold of the unscrupulous end of the travel industry. There are good travel companies who are trying to turn the corner and frankly going for the green pound or green dollar, the ethical money. But the vast majority are not. And they're saying, hey, if we're making big money, where's the problem? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it is the government that must be held to account. We know what we think the travel industry are up to. They're not telling us their arguments, but we know what they are, and they're unscrupulous and wrong. And the trouble is, government is often swayed by big business and being told by big business, well, we'll go and set up abroad. That's not good enough. They won't. And because they're making a good living here and they can continue to. So the answer is, certainly for anyone from the UK listening, on our website are letters that are ready-made for you to cut and paste and send to our Secretary of State, Steve Reed, at the Environment Department. That must be done in huge numbers. Sign our petition. Always, wherever you are, when you book a holiday, always ask the provider do you allow any direct contact with any animals? And if they do, say, I'm not interested, I'm taking my business elsewhere. You should not do business with them. The other ways to help, of course, are to join Save the Asian Elephants. You can do that really easily. You can contact me direct. You can email us, and we will, if you want to offer help, that's great. If you want to offer any expertise in writing articles, social media posts, introducing us to audiences, these are all fabulous things for us.
What's the email? And you can keep going. Well, give me the email.
Okay, Save the Asian Elephants at, it's all one word, Save the Asian Elephants at stae.org.
I think we got that.
I'll be very happy to talk to anyone. We get a heck of a lot of emails, and we're very pleased to talk to people. And we want new audiences in the US, by the way. I'm going to
Go ahead, keep going. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sure. I'm saying I'm planning trips in the States as well as around Europe, where I travel to quite a bit. We know things are not easy in the States, but we still think these issues should be brought to bigger attention. There's sadly in the US, as in the UK, appalling abuse of animals of different, there are, for example, there are more tigers in private hands in the US than there are in the entirety of the wild across the world. I'm just giving you one species. There's a flourishing circus industry where terrible things happen. Those are caught by this act. They would not be allowed to be advertised anymore in the UK once the act here is enforced. We're looking for the same measures to be enforced around the world. I speak in the European Parliament. There's great sympathy there. And of course, we want to get it working here in the UK before we get it up and running elsewhere.
Right. So starting in the UK. Now, in America, if anyone wants to help you, one of the things you can do, you may not be able to sign up to be an intern or, contribute all the time. But what you can do with this broadcast is you can push this out to your social media. And sure. I will be doing same. And I know that Unchained TV, on my personal as well as for Unchained TV on behalf. So that's another way that you can help. But please, please, please go sign the petitions. That's the key thing. And I'm going to put that up on my social media pages where you can just click the link. So I know there's not many people watching right now, but they will see this later. So please do so. Go ahead.
They also retweeting is key. To redo our posts and keep pushing them.
Yes.
And if you can help with audiences and introductions and magazines and newspapers, that's fantastic and very, very important. Any way to raise awareness, and social media is completely crucial. It is crucial. Without that, all these poor species really have very, very slender chances even of survival. But with them, with their relentless use, they really do. And so all of what you've said and reposting our material, which is very busy online, is fabulous for us. It's very important for us and the animals. So
and
please,
if you have a podcast,
sure.
You on. Well, let's just repeat every way people can do it. The first thing is go sign the petition. Most important, would you say?
Well, it is important, but the numbers are so huge now that government are persuaded there's massive public support, both here and abroad. I would say the most important is reposting our posts in every platform and around and to your own audiences. This is really big. But secondly is to put us in touch with people of influence. You may be of that influence who can help us to get stuff published, both hard and soft copy form, and to spread the word through that medium and audiences. As I said, colleges and so on and offline. I do lots of public speaking on these issues. We get enormous interest and very big audiences. So that's really important. Down to the particulars, of course, we need money because we've got none and we take no pay, never. We need funds to sustain and enlarge our work. If you can help, times are hard, but if you can help with anything, We're immensely grateful. It goes straight to our work for all the animals. We don't take anything ourselves, of course not. And people who can speak for us. And don't forget, when you book your holiday, bear in mind to ask the travel agent if it's anything to do with animals. Do you allow direct contact with the animals? And if you do, if they do or they don't know, you should say, well, I'm not going to place my holiday with you. I'm going elsewhere.
Exactly. Well, we're just about out of our time, believe it or not. We're almost to 40 minutes. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity. I think we covered everything, but if you want to make one last comment or statement, please do so.
Okay. Well, I think it's a critical time now for the animals. So many are near to the point of no return at all. And some of those species we've mentioned today, like tigers, that applies to. They are being ruined by our own species. It's a tragedy. This act, the Animals Low Welfare Activities Abroad Act, really throws a lifeline to thousands of endangered and vulnerable species. Some are not endangered, but they're highly vulnerable, like the equids, horses, donkeys, camels, mules, and so on, have a terrible time in tourism around the Middle East and places like that, in Eastern Mediterranean countries. And we ask you to take any of these measures to help us to get this act through. I can assure you, I know there are millions of fantastic animal lovers across the US, and we will be linking up with you and want you to link up with us, because you are very high on our list of people we want to support in adopting similar measures in the US. So if you want to contact me, please do. We will be very pleased, and we always reply. And so often we find ways to work together. We'd be most grateful. One final thing I'd say is I hope to be around for many years. However, I guess I know I'm doing something right, because I'm now being periodically threatened online by people by groups in Thailand, which I visited not long ago, about my activities. I guess that is a feather in my cap. It's not something that should cow me. And I intend to push on, and I hope with your support, and Lindsey's channel has always been great. And I hope to make many new friends in the States from the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Well, I would love to, if you do come here, I'd love to have you at my home, and the people I know here, I will definitely invite them.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, we're really keen to do it. We're kind of training our site so much on the Westminster Parliament. We are hopeful, because it's got massive public support, anywhere between 80 to 99%. That's what all the polls show this. They also show, our latest polling shows, that a clear majority of the country regard the implementation of this law as a very high priority. That's extremely rare that any law is so regarded, let alone an animal law, but this one is. And so we're heartened.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so obvious when you get the facts of what's going on and you see what's behind the scenes of a tiger selfie. Right. Now you're having a meeting tomorrow, so we'll keep you in our thoughts. Please get back with me. And as I said, I will be promoting these out on my social media, also on Unchained TV. If you guys are not following us, please join Unchained TV. It's free to download the app. That's the streaming network, but also on Facebook, all major social media. We are there, and there will be clips, so you can take the clips and repost them from there as well. But Duncan, please let us know what happens tomorrow. Send me a little clip, something, and we will share it out. And we want to get people behind this.
Certainly will, and we hope to have more meetings with them. We hope we'll be talking about when and how implementation will happen, not lots of excuses and reasons for not doing so. Which have found successive governments have very fertile minds when it comes to not doing things. We hope this government doesn't emulate its predecessors.
Yes, well, you do have a new government, and let's keep our fingers crossed. So
Yeah.
thank you for being on. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much. Thank